Tomorrow night is Vishveda Sivan. I'll wait till you get it sorted. So the sound is working. Tomorrow night is Vishveda Sivan, month of Matan Torah. And this Shabbos, we read Parshas Bamidbar, as we usually do on the Shabbos before Shavuos. What's the connection of Parshas Bamidbar? That Parshas Bamidbar is almost always the Shabbos before Shavuos. So the superficial explanation is, the Talmud says in Parshas, we read this Pesach, the reprimand, Parshas B'Chukosa. We read this past Shabbos. 49. First, it starts off with incredible blessings. As we discussed last week, my statutes, guard my mitzvahs, my commandments. Then there's a whole list of beautiful blessings that are promised. Then it says, don't listen to me. Then it enumerates 49 undesirable things of it. That's called the Teichach, the reprimand. Teichach appears twice in the Torah. First in B'Chukosa, then in the book of Varim, which is a Deuteronomy, which is a repetition that happened in the first 4 books. Moshe Rabbeinu gives a quick sum up of everything that happened of the 40 years in the desert. So you have the Teichacha also in Parshas Kisava. So our Chachamim tell us that we should set out the reading of the Torah, the schedule of reading of the Torah in such a manner that we should read Parshas B'Chukosa, the Teichacha Parshas B'Chukosa before Shavuos, and the Teichacha Parshas Kisava before Rosh Hashanah. The citizens brought that before you put in a piece of jewelry in a box, you clean out the box, make sure it's clean. So before we receive the Torah, which is a tremendous gift, before we receive the Ksiv Torah, which is also a tremendous gift, so we have a little cleaning process. That's the Teichacha. So the Teichacha Parshas B'Chukosa is meant to be read before Shavuos. Teichacha Parshas Kisava is meant to be read before Rosh Hashanah. However, we don't want to go straight from a Teichacha into so we have an interruption. So between the Teichacha, Parshas B'Chukosa, and Shavuos, you always have Parshas Bamidbar. Sometimes Nosai as well, but usually it's just Bamidbar. And before, after the Teichacha, Parshas Kisava, before you come to Rosh Hashanah, you have Parshas Nitzavim. And sometimes Nitzavim and Vayelech together. So simply speaking, the reason we read Bamidbar on the Shabbos before Shavuos is because we want to interrupt between the B'Chukosa and Yom. Not because of anything connected with Parshas Bamidbar. However, we know that everything in the Torah is exact. Everything in the Torah is perfect. So if the Torah sets out that before Shavuos we should read Parshas Bamidbar, it's obviously not just because something has to interrupt between B'Chukosa and Shavuos, but also because there's some connection between Parshas Bamidbar and Shavuos. What's the connection between Parshas Bamidbar and Matan Torah? So really, it's a pasuk. There's a pasuk in Parshas Chukas when it talks about the Shiras HaBe'er. Parshas Chukas, it tells the story how the Jewish people sang the song of praise to Hashem for the well of Miriam that accompanied them in the desert. It was a rock and roll, a rock that rolled along with the Jewish people wherever they went for 40 years in the desert. And that rock provided them as a well, provided them with water. And that wasn't the merit of Miriam HaNaviah. So it's called the Air Miriam. And there's a special song, Parshas Chukas, Oz Yasher Yisrael Sashira Hazois. This is a special song that the Jewish people sang and prayed to Hashem that He provided them with this air. And in that Shira, there's reference to various things, various miracles. And it mentions in that Shira, Bamidbar Matan. From the desert came a great gift. Doesn't say what the gift is, but the Gemara says that the gift is the Torah. And why Bamidbar Matan? Why does this gift have to come from the desert? Simple. Jewish people were in the desert at the time. So Hashem gave the Torah in the desert. But it comes out from the pasuk of Bamidbar Matan that this gift of the Torah had to come specifically in the desert. Bamidbar. Why did it have to come specifically in the desert? The Gemara says, one of the reasons the Gemara says is because a person who makes himself like a desert, who is humble, and treats himself like a desert, and lets everyone step on him. You know, sometimes you come to a beautiful garden, there's a nice fence around it, there's a sign, no trespassing. Beautiful garden, everybody stay out. A desert doesn't make a big deal of itself. It lets everybody step on. No trespassing sign. So if a person makes himself humble like a desert, it's a hakol dashim, but everybody steps on him, then he's receptive to the Torah, he can receive the Torah. Humility is a prerequisite to Torah. Like we say in the kind of Tzur, we mentioned this in the previous year, I think, my soul should be like dust before everyone. Open up my heart to your Torah. Humility is a prerequisite to Torah. So it depends on in what context. The idea is that a person doesn't consider himself a big deal, and he not worried about his honor, gets on with the job. So the lashon in the Gemara is that a person makes himself like a desert, hakol dashim by that everyone can step on, then he is receptive to things. Therefore, Bamidbar matana, from the desert came the gift. So we see clearly that there's a connection between Parshas Bamidbar, which means in the desert, and Shavuos, which is man matana saying. First, you have Bamidbar, humble like a desert, and then you receive the Torah. Now, actually, we find this also in the sequence of preparations for Matan Torah. So that tomorrow night is Rosh Chodesh Sivan. Tomorrow goes through all the preparations that took place from Rosh Chodesh Sivan until Matan Torah, how the Jewish people prepared for it. So, according to Rashi and Chumash, the final preparation for Matan Torah on the 5th of Sivan was the declaration of Na'aseh v'Nishma. Na'aseh v'Nishma, we will do and we will listen. What does Na'aseh v'Nishma mean? First of all, we will do without asking questions. Whatever you say, we're accepting it. And then the Nishma will hear, we'll find out, we'll learn about it. But first thing, we're giving unconditional commitment to accept everything you tell us. In other words, the Jewish people could have said, Nishma v'Na'aseh. We will hear what you have to say, we'll think about it, we'll consider it, we'll analyze it. And if it passes our analysis, then we'll go for it. Well, they didn't say that. They said, Na'aseh v'Nishma. First, we're giving unconditional commitment to do, and then we will listen. So this is Na'aseh v'Nishma as a statement of great bittul, statement of great self-nullification. I give myself over completely, whether I do understand or I don't understand. If you, Hashem, are asking me to do it, count me in. Na'aseh v'Nishma. And this was the final preparation before they received the Torah. Again, the same idea that bittul, self-nullification, subservience, is a prerequisite for receiving the Torah. Same idea that before we receive the Torah, we have Parshas Bamidbar, which is the idea of a midbar shehakol dashim. You might ask, why would subservience and self-nullification be a prerequisite for receiving the Torah? And the Torah is it's your wisdom and your understanding for the eyes of the nations. It's wisdom, it's genius wisdom that the Jewish people are so proud of. So if we're talking about receiving the Torah, which is incredible wisdom, surely the preparation for receiving the Torah should be sharpening your brain. It should be something to do with the brilliance of the person receiving it, not the subservience and self-nullification. That's the opposite. It means I'm nobody, I'm nothing. To receive such a beautiful, brilliant Torah, you have to be a somebody that can understand, that can appreciate it, not a nobody. Why is bittul a preparation for receiving the Torah? So the answer to this question comes through asking another question. Question that's been asked many, many times, very, very fundamental question. That is, why do we make such a big deal about Matan Torah? The giving of the Torah on the 6th of Sivan. What exactly happened on the 6th of Sivan? What major change was affected on the 6th of Sivan? Avraham Avinu studied Torah prior to the 6th of Sivan. Yitzchak Avinu studied Torah prior to the 6th of Sivan. Yaakov Avinu studied Torah. There was a yeshiva Shem Ve'ever prior to the 6th of Sivan. Shevet Levi in Egypt studied Torah. Mimeim shel Aviseinu leParsha Yeshiva Nehema. Sages tell us throughout the history of our forefathers, they never ceased to have the institution of sitting and studying Torah. The Jewish people always studied Torah. So what happened on the 6th of Sivan? Hashem came along and gave them the Torah that they already had for generations. We make such a big deal out of it. So the answer is that prior to Matan Torah, when someone studied Torah, they were taking Torah. They were taking Torah in accordance with their ability. So with a human being, creation's limited capacity, they were taking in whatever parts of Torah they were able to take, they were able to understand, they were able to interact with, according to their ability. They took Torah. But being that Torah is the infinite wisdom of Hashem, Hashem is infinite, and therefore the Torah is one with Him. And a human being, a finite human being, can only take that which is within his grasp to take. He's limited, and therefore his ability to take is limited. But by Matan Torah, Hashem gave us the Torah. And Hashem is infinite. So when He gives the Torah, He gives the infinity of Torah and gives it to every single Jew. And says, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, the opening words of Aseret, which Anoichi is in Rosh Tevis, the Gemara says, Anon nafshi ksavis yehovas. I, my very self, I've written it in and given it over. So in the Torah, Hashem gives us Himself. He is infinite. His Torah is infinite. And in Matan Torah, Hashem gave every single Jew, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord thy God, the singular. Because Hashem gives every single Jew the entire Torah, and every Jew that stood by Matan Torah, which includes both the people that were alive then and the neshamas of the future generations, all received from Hashem Himself the entirety of Torah, as it's one with Hashem Himself, and every Jew that was standing there felt that it was a personal, one-on-one statement being made to him as an individual. Yes? Good question. The question was just asked. He said that Abraham Avinu started the Torah. Where did he get it from? So there was Adam Arishin had access to certain aspects of Torah, and Noach had certain aspects. That's how it says that. Rashi says in Chumash, Noach was told to take from the kosher birds, take 7 and 7. From the non-kosher birds, just 2. So Rashi says, from here we know that Noach studied Torah. How else would he know which birds are kosher, which birds are not kosher? So there was certain access that was available to certain tzaddikim throughout the ages. They had access to certain aspects of Torah. But it was all, since it was them taking rather than Hashem giving. So when a created being takes, he takes according to the limitations of his grasp, of his capacity. But when Hashem, who is infinite, gives, then He gives the infinite, which means He gives the essence of Torah, which is one with Hashem Himself. And that they didn't have before. So Matan Torah is when Hashem gave to every individual Jew the entire Torah, which is one with Hashem Himself. Now Hashem Himself is infinite. Our capacity for taking is finite. How can Hashem give the infinity of Torah to us? So the preparation which is necessary for a finite being to be able to absorb infinity is bittul, self-nullification. I am nobody. If I feel that I'm truly nobody, then I am receptive to everything. I don't have to come to a clever person, tell him something. He has to figure it out. He has to grasp it. He has to fit into to the structure of his thinking, or else he can't deal with it. But if you say, I'm nobody, whatever you tell me, I accept. And there's no limit to what you can accept. So when Hashem gave the Jewish people the infinity of Torah, the most important preparation for that was bittul, self-nullification. That's why in the Shabbos before Matan Torah, Hashem Himself is coming. Matan Torah, say the season of the giving of the Torah. It's not only that commemorates the story that 3,300 and some odd years ago, Hashem came and gave us the Torah. It's the Zman Matan Torah, it means the Torah is being given in this season now again. Every year the Torah is given on this day once again. So there's a repeat performance of everything that took place 3,300 and some odd years ago at Sinai, repeats itself now. And the way that we prepare for it is Bamidbar. So therefore, on the Shabbos before Matan Torah, we read Bamidbar. This also explains, we mentioned many times that when the Torah was given, it says, V'chol ha'om royim es hakodesh, that the entire nation saw the sound. You ever saw sounds? You hear sounds, you don't see sounds. What does it mean, V'chol ha'om royim es hakodesh? Well, you have to understand why were there such enormous noises and sounds by Matan Torah. What was the big deal? My shirtzach, don't steal, don't kill. My signet, don't steal. That you have to have big, big sound effects. Those are simple things that everybody understands. But the event of Matan Torah was the fact, as we said before, the fact that Hashem took His infinite essence and gave it over to every single Jew. For the infinity to come down to a finite world, that's an incredible thing. That's like an impossibility. And that's what happened by Matan Torah. And it says over there that they saw the sound. Doesn't mean they saw the sound. You don't see sound, you hear sound. So our sages say they saw that which is normally heard. And according to some opinions, they saw that which is normally heard, and they heard that which is normally seen. What does that mean? So one of the interpretations is brought of Chassidus, very, very fascinating. Is that in life we have what we see and what we hear. What do we see? We see that there's a world, a natural world, according to the rules of nature. Things go in a certain pattern. You go to university, you get some good degree, you're probably going to have parnasa. And you go to best doctor, you probably get the best medical treatment. You have a good, strong army, you'll probably get security. Things work according to the rules of nature. That's what we see. What do we hear? We're told that there's an Eibishter. You have to have the Tachem in the Eibishter, and you have to daven, and learn Torah, and get stuck, and have the Tachem, and the Eibishter will help. Right? So what we see is that there's a world. What we hear is that there's an Eibishter. By Matan Torah, the tables were turned. They saw that which we normally hear. What did they see when they stood before Har Sinai? They saw Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Wherever they turned, to the right, to the left, up, down, east, west, north, and south, they saw one reality. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Hashem says, I am Hashem. That's the only reality that they saw. Whichever direction they looked, they saw one truth. There's only Hashem and nothing else. Ein oid milvadei. You were shown, Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Jewish people in Parshas, when he repeats that, he says, you were shown to know ki Hashem hu Elokim, the Almighty is God. Ain't oid milvadei. There's nothing else except Him. So the reality that every Jew saw by Matan Torah was ain't oid milvadei. There's nothing else except Him. So what we normally hear about, they saw. What about what we normally see? We normally see the world. That they heard. What does it mean they heard? They heard that in the Torah they're receiving is a pasuk, gracious brother of in the beginning Hashem created heaven and earth. So if the Torah, which is coming from Hashem, says that there's a heaven and an earth, so there must be a heaven and an earth somewhere. It says in the Torah, there must be a world. But the reality that they experience is there's only Hashem. Torah says there's a world, there must be a world as well. So we see, they heard, and we hear, they saw. And when a Yid comes through us, especially when you come to Shul, if you hear the Torah being read on the first day Shavuos, it's a repeat performance of what happened by Matan Torah. So the impact that it has on our neshama is somewhat similar to that event. It says in Psikta de Afkana, a medrash, that the Eibishter says to Yidden, Banai, my children, you read this portion each year. Consider it as though you're standing in front of me at Har Sinai and receiving the Torah. So when Parsha of the Sefer Sadik is read on Shavuos, every Yid is re-experiencing Matan Torah. Either he's more conscious of it, he's less conscious of it, but the reality is still the reality. And the impact that it can have on our neshama is unbelievable. And that's why it makes no difference if the person is a big scholar or he is a little baby. And every neshama stood before Har Sinai. Every neshama stands and on Shavuos, and the impact that Hashem has on every Yid, the essence of Hashem, that is Anochi Hashem Elokecha, that is the greatest genius doesn't understand, because it's not understandable, it's beyond understanding. And the simplest Yid, as a neshama, can absorb it. In fact, we say that the Torah is Meirasha Kehilas Yaakov, an inheritance for the community of Yaakov. An inheritance is something. How old does one have to be an heir? Be a baby of one day. Baby of one day can inherit billions of dollars. So the Torah is called an inheritance. Every Yid received the entire Torah from Hashem. The entire Torah. Because in every word of the Torah, there is the essence of a Torah. So this is to do with the fact that the Rebbe encourages, see to it that every Jew should leave ourselves a dibbas on Shavuos, including little children. And also connects it with the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Says in Pirkei Avos that Rabbi Yechon and Zakkai had 5 Talmidim. One of them was Rabbi Shiur ben Chananya. Rabbi Yechon and Zakkai enumerated their praise. He said the praise of everyone. Came to Rabbi Shiur ben Chananya. He said, "What's his praise? Ashrei Yeladu." The mother who gave birth to him is. So Parshas explained what's unique about Rabbi Shiur ben Chananya, that the mother who gave birth to him is fortunate. Says that when Rabbi Shiur ben Chananya was a baby, his mother used to bring his cat to the Beis Hamedrash, and he should be in the presence of the Talmud studying Torah, should hear the sound of Torah, and it should make an impact on him. From that he grew up to be Rabbi Shiur ben Chananya. Nowadays, even doctors know that a baby is affected by the environment that it finds itself. But Torah knew this all along, and so Wednesday, Mitzvah Hashem, coming Wednesday is the first day of Shavuos. Whoever can be encouraged to be there, present, Seres Adibris. It's a tremendous chus, and the impact is set beyond anything that we can fathom. So. Unless there are any questions, we spoke about it now. We know. Okay. Question was: is there a difference between Matan Torah and Kabbalah Torah? And is there more emphasis on one, or more emphasis on the other? So, in line with what I was speaking about Hashem giving His infinity, that's Matan Torah. That can only be absorbed through bit, right? However, the Eibishter gave us the Torah, and He wants that we should not just be overwhelmed by it, but we should also take it in. We should understand it, learn it, understand it, be inspired by it, with it. So, therefore, after the initial process, after the self-modification, there needs to be another program of absorbing the Torah in a way that you actually, it becomes internalized in you. It's not only the wisdom of Hashem, and it's got nothing to do with you, all you can do is nullify yourself to it. After the Nasa comes the Nishma. Nasa Vinishma. Vinishma means we will make an effort to integrate it into our being by learning it and understanding. So Hashem gives us His infinite Torah, but He gives it to us in such a manner that it's contained within understandable, graspable information. And He wants us to learn it, grasp it, in a way that it should become our way of thinking, it should become our understanding. That second aspect of Kabbalah. Thank you for pointing that out. Sure. I'm not saying that. Okay, I don't know that there is Rabbi benching lich. I don't know that it has to be a fun. As far as that Meire and Kiddush are concerned, that should probably be on. In other words, the issue is that because the 49 days of Spirit are referred to in the Torah as Sheva Shabbos, 7 complete weeks, 49 days complete. Therefore, there is a custom accepted in, as far as I know, most Ashkenazic communities, that we're careful not to bring in the Yom Tov of Shavuos early, because if you bring it in early, you're chipping away at the days of Spirit. Right? First, you have 49 days of Spirit. And the conclusion of the 49 days of Spirit is Shavuos. Right? So if you bring in Shavuos early, you're chipping away at the last day of Spirit. As far as I know, the Sephardim do not have such a minute, but Ashkenazim do have such a minute. So one thing. So then the question now you bring in the question about benching this. So what I was saying till now in reference to Rabbi Meir and in reference to Kiddush. Now, as far as benching lich is concerned, I don't know exactly how that works. I'll tell you why. Because many women have the custom on Yom Tov to bench lich, the time of lich bench. Now, the time of Lichtmenschen is before sunset anyway. So does it make a difference if I do it 15 minutes before sunset, or half an hour before sunset, or 45 minutes before sunset? As long as it's after Plag HaMincha, I can't see why there's any difference. But I'm not going into Paskin Shilas, but it don't really gain much. If you're anyway going to wait for the Suda until it's dark, you gain much by benching with that much earlier or that much earlier. So I don't want to say I've ever heard that there's a deal on Shavuos to bench licht after Shkia. I never heard such a thing. There are surely women that bench licht always every out of Yom Tov before on top, and nobody ever criticized. So therefore, I wouldn't say that you cannot bench licht early. I'm just saying that as far as officially stamping it as Yom Kiddush, and divided, there the custom in Ashkenazic communities is that we wait until the Sfira is the 49 days of Sfira are complete when the 49th day is over. 49th day is over when the 3 stars come out. It's night. The second night, there's a problem with the fact that you can't prepare from the first day to the second. So therefore, the custom in most communities is that you don't do anything until the time of Matzah Shabbos. The first day Yom Tov goes out, and then shlich, and you can wash the dishes, and you can warm up food, and do everything for the second night. Which on Shavuos is quite a challenge because it's very late. Yeah. Now I know that there are heterim that are used in certain communities to do it differently, but I'll let the Rabbanim of those communities work it out. I'm not going to get it done. Okay, so the question was, if one brings in Shabbos early, this week, Friday is restrained. One brings in Shabbos early and it has no Suda before it's dark, when it comes to benching, do you say Yalav? I believe the answer is no. Because once you have declared it Shabbos, that you're following the opinions that say at the end of the day is Plag HaMincha, and Plag HaMincha starts a new day. So if as far as that is concerned, if it's a new day, it's Shabbos. If it's Shabbos, it's not restrained. The other way around, if Rosh Chodesh would be Matzoi Shabbos, yeah, and you ate the Suda on Shabbos, and the Suda extended itself into the night, and you ate a kazayas while it was light, and a kazayas after dark, then you would say, and Yalav the other inventing, but the say would be thanking Hashem for the food that you ate on Shabbos, and the Yalav the other would be thanking Hashem for the food that you ate after Shabbos. Okay, very good question. The question that was asked, let me just repeat it for people are hearing on the Zoom, that if we received the Torah by Har Sinai, the year 2448, from Hashem himself, there was such and all the Neshamas were there, such an incredible event. What is this idea of it repeating itself every year? Why do we need to repeat it every year? There's an eternal impact that we got at the time of Matan Torah. And you can't add anything to it, it would appear. So, to the best of my ability to answer that question, I think it's a brilliant question. To the best of my ability to answer that question, I would say like this, that a top-up never does any harm, especially when we're a little bit desensitized. So we need to we need to reawaken that experience. That's on a very simple level. And on a deeper level, we find in Tanya, connection with Rosh Hashanah, the Alter Rebbe explains that every year Rosh Hashanah, an chadash, a new light is drawn down, greater than ever before. Out of Rosh Hashanah, the old light from the previous year is withdrawn, and a new light is drawn down through the tefillos and the tkiyos. A new energy comes down from heaven, greater than ever before. And the Rebbe says that similarly, when it comes to Matan Torah, there is a certain greatness of Matan Torah where every year is greater than the year before. Therefore, we need to make new preparations for Matan Torah. This is a higher dimension of Matan Torah than we had before. Therefore, when it comes to Rosh Chodesh Sivan, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Ki Ish Echad, the Lev Echad, where the Jewish people camped like one man with one heart, Achdus, unity. We know that Achdus is a preparation for Matan Torah. So to prepare for the new Matan Torah that we're going to get this year, which is greater than ever before, we need to achieve a greater unity amongst Klal Yisrael more than ever before. And when it comes to, we said before about Nasa B'Nishma, about Bittul, about preparing ourselves by making an undertaking to accept everything the Torah tells us without questioning, and then also learn about it. So that commitment needs to be done even in a stronger way than ever before, because we're going to receive the Torah on a higher level than ever before. And the fact is that although the whole Torah was included in the Torah which we received at Har Sinai, nevertheless, we know that when Mashiach comes, there'll be new dimensions of Torah will be revealed. Now, those new dimensions of Torah were also included by Matan Torah, but they weren't revealed. And they will be revealed when Mashiach comes. Similarly, there's a certain aspect of Matan Torah which is every year gets stronger and stronger. And a Jew comes to shul on Shavuos, and here's Aseres HaDibros. So first of all, it's a good tapa, and we should be more in touch with that reality that we already experienced in Matan Torah in the year 2448. Plus, there is even a greater aspect of Matan Torah which we never had before. A greater intensity. Sure. Only will be more studies. Yes, everything you're saying I hear, but I think that sorry? Yeah, okay. The question over here there's an assumption over here that since that Avraham Avinu was surrounded by idolaters and he found his own way to Hashem, then he taught Yitzchak and Yitzchak taught Yaakov, and then when it came down to Mitzrayim, so only Shevet Levi kept the tradition. They continued to study the Torah. The other tribes lost the plot to some extent. They were assimilating amongst the idolaters. And the words of the Rambam is that almost completely was forgotten the tradition coming from Avraham Avinu until Moshe Rabbeinu came and started also. So the suggestion was made that perhaps that's where they needed the Bamidbar that we spoke about before to cleanse themselves from what they had in Mitzrayim. So it's interesting the way you put it, but I think it's important to clarify that since we're dealing here with a Torah which is one with Hashem, therefore it's infinite. So no matter how great the scholarship of Shevet Levi was, it doesn't compare at all to what was coming their way by Matan Torah. And therefore, this idea that Bamidbar is a preparation for Matan Torah is just as true for Shevet Levi as it's true for everybody else. Maybe what they needed to deal with, whether it was cleansing or whether it was just self-nullification to a higher, maybe that in certain senses was different. But the principle that in order to receive an infinite Torah from an infinite God that puts himself into the Torah, then a creation can only receive that by completely nullified. And that would be the same whether you were from Shevet Levi, whether you were Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak Avinu, Yaakov Avinu. As long as you hadn't yet had Matan Torah, you weren't being given the Torah by Hashem himself. You were entering into a whole new dimension of relationship with Hashem, which needed a special preparation. So the point was just made that the Avos were so great, and nevertheless they weren't zeichet to Kabbalah something. So the Avos, they planted the seeds for their descendants, for us to be able to receive the Torah. There's a pasuk in Shir Hashirim that says, "L'reach shmanecha tovim, femen turak shmech." And our Chachamim say that the mitzvahs that the Avos perform are like reichos, they're like the aroma. But the mitzvahs that we perform are like the oil itself. which means that the Avos, because they were doing things on their own steam, they were great. They were very, very great tzaddikim, and they were very spiritual, but they were doing things on their own steam. So they're only able to grasp that which a finite human being is able to get hold of. But the essence of Hashem, which comes from Hashem Himself, it wasn't given, so they didn't have it. By Matan Torah, Hashem gave Himself, and then nafshi ksavus yehot. And therefore, a mitzvah after Matan Torah, the Torah study after Matan Torah takes on a whole new dimension. So the Avos planted the seeds, which made it possible for us to have this incredible gift. But there's no question about it. That by Matan Torah, a whole new beginning. It's a whole new beginning. And whatever was before is not comparable at all to what happened by Matan Torah. That's why Shavuos is such an incredible Yom Tov. Okay. We're going to move on to Tanya. We're starting the introduction to the second section. Which is page 150, numbers on top of the page.
283, 284.
283, 284 numbers on the bottom of the page. Thank you, Mrs. Okay, so if you remember from the first section of Tanya, we had a title page, a Shiur block. Then we had a Hakdama, an introduction. And both were written by the Alter Rebbe himself. Therefore, both are included in the Friedrich Rebbe set out the study schedule for Tanya. For the Chitas, he put in Shiur block and the Hakdama into the study schedule. So it was written by the Alter Rebbe himself to be studied. So in the second section, we also have a Shiur block and a Hakdama. The only thing is, in the second section, the Shiur block, the title page is not a page on its own, it's just the top of it. And then the Hakdama starts right in. In Yiddish, it's called a Shiur block. Block means a page. Shiur means the gate, title page. So in the first section of Tanya, the title page was a page on its own. And the first few lines were written by the Alter Rebbe, we studied them. Here, he also writes a few lines, but it's not printed as a page on its own. It's just printed as a little crown on top of the Hakdama. And then you have the Hakdama, the introduction. So it starts off by saying Lekutei Amarim Chelek Sheni. The whole sefer is called Lekutei Amarim, which is a collection of sayings. And this is, we pointed out when we learned the first section, Alter Rebbe, in his great humility, did not describe himself as the author and did not suggest that he was sharing anything new, but it's just compiling what was already said. Lekutei Amarim means a compilation of sayings. Chelek Sheni, this is the second section. First section is Sefer Shol Beinanim. This is Chelek Sheni, the second section. Anikra b'shem chinuch katan, which is called the education of a child. Now, it's a little bit peculiar because once we start the second section, it's going to be referred to as Shar HaYichud V'Ha'emunah, the gate of unity and faith. Because most of the topic that is discussed in the second section of Tanya is the unity of Hashem and the idea of having emunah. Nevertheless, this in the title page, it refers to it as Hanikra Hashem Chinuch Katan. It's called the education of a child. The reason for this is because the Hakdama begins with the pasuk Hanoich L'Nar, as we're going to see, Hanoich L'Nar Al Pi Darkei, educated a lad according to his way. So, so because the Hakdama begins with Hanoich L'Nar, so the Alter Rebbe also refers to it over here on the title page. Hanikra Hashem Chinuch Katan. He's going to explain how the education of the child, of the lad, is talking about educating one in Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem, as we're going to talk about in this in the introduction that we're going to do. Then he goes on to say, it's compiled from books and from scribes, Deishei Elyon, of supernal holiness, the Flas of Eden, and the soul's rest in Gan Eden, Yusuf Apas Apash B'Shemus of Fish. It's based on the first portion of Fish. So, first of all, he mentions that it's compiled from Svarim and from Soif. Svarim, books, these are great scholars of Jewish thought who wrote books, but the Alter Rebbe didn't know them personally. They were previous generations. And according to a tradition from Siddur, it's a specific reference to the Rambam and to the Maral Mipran, He was an ancestor of the Alter Rebbe, public generation before the Alter Rebbe, and the Shalom HaKadosh, Rabbi Shiur Horowitz, the author of the Shalom. So the Alter Rebbe was very influenced by the thought, by Jewish thought, as written by the Rambam, by the Maral Mitrag, and the Shalom. And the Seifrim from scribes is a reference to the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid, who they didn't write their teachings, but the Alter Rebbe personally studied under the Magid. And from the Magid, he was taught the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. So he refers to, by Svarim, he's referring to those great Jewish thinkers and scholars who were before his times. And he read their books and he was influenced by their books. That's the Rambam, the Maral Mitrag, and the Shalom. And when he says Seifrim, he's referring to the Baal Shem Tov and the Meshach Magid, who he received their teachings orally. And it's Miyusid al Pashin Rishenish of Krishna. It's based on the first portion of Krishna. Remember, the first section, the Alter Rebbe said that it's based on the pasuk. That is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart to do. This section is Miyusid al Pashin Rishenish of Krishna. It's based on the first portion. Now, we're going to see when we get into the actual Sharif that it very much deals with the first pasuk, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. It talks about the unity of Hashem, after of Hashem, Hashem Echad. And it's Baruch Shem Kved Malchus Eloheinu Goed, which the Alter Rebbe is going to explain how that is one notch lower in understanding the unity of Hashem. So you put the Elah and you put the Torah. We don't actually see in this section how he expounds on any of the further psukim in the first portion of the Shema, but which talks about loving Hashem with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Talks about studying Torah. Talks about putting on tefillin. Talks about mezuzah. None of these subjects seem to be covered in Sharif and Damuna. It's only the first two psukim before the pasuk Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and then the line Baruch Shem Kved Malchus Eloheinu Goed, which we can see overtly the Alter Rebbe discussing. Why he refers to saying that this book is based on the entire first Parshas of Shema is something that we have to get clarity in. That it doesn't seem to be overtly on the agenda. So that is the title page. The Kutei Amarim Chelik Sheni also has a subtitle, as we're going to see when we turn the page, onto page 152. From that page onward, every page tells on a Shara Yikot. And the way the Alter Rebbe will explain the concept of chinuch in this context, we'll see that it goes along the same line. Okay, so we start off in the actual introduction. He starts off by quoting the pasuk Halech l'nar al pi darkei, educate a lad according to his way. Gam ki yazkin lo yasser mimenu. Even when he grows old, he will not forsake. So the simple understanding of this pasuk is, you want to educate a young person in the ways of faith. So you have to evaluate what that person is capable of absorbing, and you have to teach it to them on their level. And in that way, as they grow older, they will stay in the ways of Torah. However, the Alter Rebbe feels that there is much more to this pasuk, because if you look at the pasuk carefully, it doesn't seem to make sense. You're saying educate the child in his way, which means don't give him the whole 9 months. Don't give it the entire intensity. Only give him as much as you think he can absorb. That means you're adjusting it for his capacity. So what do you want should happen in the long term? His capacity will get greater, and you'll be able to give him more and more until you'll be able to give him the full thing, right? So what are you telling me? Gam ki yazkin lo yasser mimena. Even if he gets older, he will not forsake. He will not turn away from it. What's the it? It is what you educated him. Isn't the idea that he should turn away from it and should go to something bigger and better? If you're educating him al pi darkei, in a way that has been tailored for him according to his limitation, then surely your intention is that as he grows older, he should leave the limitations with which you educated him and go into bigger and better things. So it shouldn't say Gam ki yazkin lo yasur mimena. He shouldn't forsake what you've taught him. He should forsake what you've taught him and go on to something bigger. So obviously the pasuk is trying to tell me something more. Let's read that inside. Educate a lad according to his ways. Even when he grows old, he will not turn away from it. Since it says by his way, so it's not the ultimate path of truth. He's not ready yet for the ultimate path. He's only ready for something that's tailored to his capacity to absorb. If that's the case, why is it good news? Why is it something great? That even as he gets older, he will not forsake it. He will not turn away from it. Don't you want him to turn away from it and turn to something bigger and better, which is closer to the ultimate truth? Right. So the question was, but if you don't appreciate his level where he's at now, you might lose him and he'll go completely. So that's a good reason why there needs to be chanech l'nar al pi darkei. But it doesn't explain the second half of the pasuk. Now, as he grows older, he won't turn away from it. What's the it? The it is what you taught him. If you have adjusted what you're teaching him according to his level, then it's not good news that he's always going to stay at that limited level. You don't teach a child in kindergarten that he should be a kindergarten child for the rest of his life. You teach him in kindergarten the building blocks of life, so that on those building blocks he should grow into the next stage and the next stage and the next stage and forsake what he's been playing in kindergarten. Okay, you're making a very, very good point. The point that Mrs. Morris is making is, I'll just repeat it to the people on the Zoom, is that we're saying that you give him the building blocks of life, and the idea is that he should be able to build on it, not forsake it, but build on it, so that you can build additional stories on top of. So you don't want him to forsake what you've given him. You want him to build on it, right? But when you say you're emphasizing that what you're teaching is limited because he is limited, right? So to say that this level of teaching that you're teaching him now is what you want him to stay with for the rest of his life, that's not what you want to achieve. So the mimena, if the mimena is talking about darka, his way, you do want him to forsake the limitations of his way. You want his way to become a greater way. So then the words, and then to say right away, in connection with that, seems to be missing something. Say, as he'll grow older, he will build on it. Not as he grow older, he'll be stuck with it. That would be counterproductive. So what is the meaning of educate him in his way? And as he grows older, he will not forsake. Okay, let's hear how the Alter Rebbe is going. Sure. Words. Well, the pasuk itself is Shlomo HaMelech's words. The pasuk itself is Shlomo HaMelech's words. The pasuk Chanech Lanar Al Pi Darkei Gam Ki Yaskin Lo Yosem Mimeno is Shlomo HaMelech's words. The Alter Rebbe is quoting it and asking a question. So the question over here is a simple question. If you are adjusting the path for the limitations of the child in order that the child should absorb it in the best way possible, then surely your intention is that with time, the child should rise to a higher level and be able to take a stronger dose. But that's what you would like should happen. That's the purpose of the exercise, right? So why then do the words say Gam ki yazkin lo yosor mimenu? He gets older, he won't turn away from it. You want him to turn away from the limitations that you're guiding him with now and to reach higher levels. But you want him to turn away from being limited to only having the foundation. It's all right. Everybody's entitled to say something different. And the Alter Rebbe is also entitled to give his opinion. It's all correct. The question that we have over here is that whatever you're teaching the child, and that is being adjusted, taking into consideration the limitations of the child. So the intention is that this should be the foundation. And on this foundation, they should build additional stories. So they should leave the limitation of having just a foundation. And they should grow to the next level. Here, the pasuk is saying, educate the child by his way, so that even as he gets older, he will not turn away from it. So which seems to imply that you want him to still hold on to what you taught him as a child, even when he grows older. So he'll have the foundation, but he'll have the foundation, he'll hold on to it. But you also want him to build the next level. And when he gets to the next level, he'll be secure in the next level, and he won't have to focus on the foundation. That'll be taken for granted. Right? True. All true. All true. Says the Alter Rebbe as follows. Achine mudazot. It's very well known. The roots of the service of Hashem and the foundations of the service of Hashem. In a moment, we'll talk about what's the difference in the roots and the foundation. Are the fear of Hashem and the love of Hashem. Hayira, the fear or the reverence, shall we say, of Hashem. Sheirish v'yisoid is both the root and the foundation, l'sur meira, turning away from evil. Don't do what Hashem tells you not to do, because if you realize the greatness and the reverence of Hashem's greatness and majesty, and you realize that He's standing right next to you and He's telling you, don't do this. So that itself will be the foundation and the roots that will inspire you to not do what you shouldn't do. And the love of Hashem will be the foundation and the roots to inspire you to do enthusiastically and passionately what Hashem is asking you. And the love of Hashem will be the roots and the foundation for doing good. The kiyum kol mitzvahs are saying the fulfillment of all positive mitzvahs, biblical mitzvahs and rabbinic mitzvahs, as will be explained in its place. So what are we saying over here? We're saying that every mitzvah has a root and a foundation. The difference between roots and foundations. Roots are responsible for the growth of the plant or the tree. The roots, the nourishment comes through the roots. So the fact that the person is today doing this mitzvah or not doing this aveda is because there are roots. The roots being his love of Hashem and his fear of Hashem. So the root is the cause of the action. When you talk about a foundation, the foundation is not just the cause of the action. The foundation is what keeps the action steady. So we learned in the first section of time that Amakaiman be'emes, to fulfill a mitzvah truthfully, there needs to be a love of Hashem. What does that mean? A person can fulfill a mitzvah correctly without loving Hashem. This is what you have to do. He does it. So we explained that emes is made up of 3 letters: Aleph, Mem, Saf. Aleph is the first letter of the Aleph base. Taf is the last letter of the Aleph base. Mem is the middle letter of the Aleph base. So what does emes mean? Truth. Truth is consistency. But it goes all the way through. the first letter, to the middle letter, to the last letter. It's the same all the way. It's possible for a person to fulfill a mitzvah and to fulfill it correctly, and to fulfill it in a way that he is halachically observing the mitzvah, fulfilling the mitzvah. And if he'll ask a Rabbi, if he has to redo it, he'll be told, no, you don't have to redo it. Next time do it better, but this time you don't have to redo it. However, it's not the emes. What do you mean it's not the emes? Emes is when the beginning and the middle and the end are all on the same page. In other words, a person has his hands and his feet, which are the tools of action. He has his heart, which is the place of emotion. He has his mind, which is the place of understanding. So when every part of every fiber of his being is on the same page, what he understands and what he's passionate about is being expressed in his hands and his feet, through his actions, then he's fulfilling the mitzvah be'emes. It's truth, it's consistent. Every fiber of his being is joining together in the fulfillment of this mitzvah. And when he does that, not only does the love of Hashem behave as the root, which is the cause of him doing the right thing, it's also the foundation of his actions, because it makes it steadfast, it makes it real, it makes it truthful. As a result of the fact that he loves Hashem, every fiber of his being is joining together to express that love through fulfilling that mitzvah. So when he does the mitzvah, he's doing it with his hands, he's doing it with his heart, he's doing it with his head. But if a person doesn't have Avos Hashem, even if he's a very disciplined person, and he's doing what he has to do, says, I have to do it, I'll do it. It doesn't mean anything. I don't have any meaningful. So then he's doing it, but it's not the Avos. So therefore, the root and the foundation of every mitzvah is Avos Hashem and Yiras. Then he goes on to say, "Mitzvah sachinuch." Please, 1 second. Mitzvah sachinuch he gam came the mitzvah saseh, and the mitzvah of chinuch, of educating a child, is also when it comes to positive mitzvahs. As it says, not only you have to educate a child not to do what is forbidden, you also have to educate a child to do what it's a mitzvah to do. So being that the love of Hashem is the root and the foundation of every single positive mitzvah, so surely a child also has to be taught to love Hashem. So there is the love of Hashem at an infantile state, and there's the love of Hashem at a mature state. So we're going to explain over here how this Chanoich Lanar Al Pi Darkei Gam Ki Yazkin Lo Yasser Bimena can be explained on two general levels of Avos Hashem. There's the general level of Avos Hashem, which is a fundamental, early stage level of Avos Hashem, the way you start off at your service of Hashem. And then there is a higher level of Avos Hashem, which perhaps only greater tzaddikim reach, but that's a completely higher level of Avos Hashem. And we're going to explain even when you reach the higher level of Avos Hashem, you shouldn't throw away the fundamental tools that you got at the beginning of your progress. Your initial Avos Hashem, you're still going to need it in certain circumstances. So even when you've reached a completely higher level of Avos Hashem, don't lose the fundamental levels that you got at the beginning. And we're going to learn what are the earlier stages, later stages, why would you lose it, why do you still need it. That's all going to come to Hashem. Come to us. Meantime, we want to wish everybody good Chaydish. Tomorrow night is Rosh Chaydish, should be said. And very freiliche Yom Tov Shavuos, Kabbalah Satayra B'Simcha, B'Pnimius, B'Sif Satayra with joy, and with innerness, meaning it should be a meaningful experience that actually touches us deeply, and we should be zeicha that long before we get to Shavuos, it's a whole week away. Should be zeicha to see a Geula Shleima. Yidden in Eretz Yisrael should have a tremendous mitzachim. All Saini Yisrael should have a machala, and we should be blessed with a Geula Amitis V'Ashleima for Mashiach Tzidkenu. Yisrael Hashem be Shavuos in the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi. Mashiach Tzidkenu b'Rishayin.
Amen.
Am I going to be awake? Not right away. And I don't think I'm going to be awake. So far as I know. Yes, 2 weeks' time.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.